By the early 1700s, strangers arrived by sea. They came first as traders, carrying cloth, guns, and promises. The British East India Company did not come to rule. At least, not at first. India was old, older than many nations. For thousands of years, her rivers fed farms, her songs filled temples, and her people lived by faith, trade, and courage.
The time has come for a decision. We must proceed with resolve.
Slowly, quietly, they learned India's roads, kingdoms, and wealth. They watched princes fight each other. They waited. By 1757, at the Battle of Plassey, everything changed. On a wet field in Bengal, British soldiers defeated Nawab Suraj-ud-Daulah using betrayal and planning, not numbers. After that day, the company gained power to collect taxes. Taxes meant control. Control meant rule. Indian farmers paid heavy dues. Indian weavers lost their jobs. Gold flowed out of India to Britain. People felt the change in daily life. Food became scarce. Laws felt unfair. Indian voices were ignored. Yet resistance was quiet, like fire under ash. Saints preached unity. Soldiers whispered anger. Mothers told stories of past heroes to their children at night. India was wounded, but not broken. The struggle had begun, even if no one yet called it freedom. It would take many years before that fire would rise, but history had started to move, slow and steady, toward a day when India would stand and speak for herself. By the mid-1800s, British rule had spread far and wide. Indian kings lost power. Old laws were replaced. Railways and telegraphs arrived, but freedom did not. Indian soldiers, called sepoys, served in the British Army. They wore British uniforms but carried Indian hearts. Many felt insulted by unfair pay, strict rules, and deep disrespect for their faith. In 1857, a rumor moved fast through the barracks. New rifle cartridges were said to be greased with cow and pig fat. To buy them was against Hindu and Muslim beliefs. When soldiers protested, they were punished. Fear turned into rage. On May 10, 1857, in Meerut, sepoys rose in anger. They marched to Delhi, shouting for the old Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, to lead them. The revolt spread like wildfire. Farmers, queens, princes, and villagers joined. Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi fought on horseback, fearless and bold. Kanwar Singh, old but strong, led fighters in Bihar. For a moment, hope burned bright. But the British struck back with force and cruelty. By 1858, the revolt was crushed. Cities were destroyed. Thousands died. The East India Company was removed, and India came under direct British Crown rule. The rebellion failed, but something new was born. Indians learned they could rise together. Fear had cracked. Silence was broken. The memory of 1857 stayed alive, remembered in songs, scars, and quiet prayers for a future free land. After 1857, Britain ruled India with tight hands. Viceroys governed. Laws favored foreigners. Yet new ideas entered India. Schools taught English. Newspapers spread news. Indians began to speak across regions. In 1885, a small but important meeting took place in Bombay. It formed the Indian National Congress. At first, its leaders asked politely for reforms, not freedom. Men like Dadabhai Naoroji spoke of money draining from India to Britain. Gopal Krishna Gokhale urged come change. They believed reason could move the empire. Year after year, petitions were sent. Year after year, little changed. Still, a national voice was forming. At the same time, pride in Indian culture grew. Swami Vivekananda spoke to the world in 1893, saying India stood for truth and spirit. Bankim Chandra wrote songs that stirred hearts. One song, Vande Mataram, became a quiet call to love the motherland. But anger also rose. In 1905, Bengal was divided by the British, claiming ease of rule. Indians saw it as divide and control. Protests filled the streets. People burned foreign cloth and wore homespun clothes instead. This Swadeshi movement showed power in unity. India was learning new ways to fight, with words, ideas, and courage instead of swords. Though freedom still felt far away, the people were waking up, step by step, to the idea that India belonged to Indians. In 1915, a thin man in simple clothes returned to India from South Africa. His name was Gandhi. He had fought injustice there using a new weapon, nonviolence. Gandhi believed truth and peace were stronger than guns. He traveled across India by train, watching villages, listening to pain. In 1917, farmers in Champaran, Bihar, asked for his help. British planters forced them to grow indigo and kept them poor. Gandhi stood with the farmers, come but firm. The British backed down. Soon after, he supported workers in Ahmedabad and farmers in Kedah. Each time, he won without lifting a hand. World War I had ended, but hope was crushed in 1919. The British passed the Rowlatt Act, allowing arrests without trial. People protested peacefully. On April 13, 1919, in Amritsar, soldiers fired into a trapped crowd at Jallianwala Bagh. Hundreds died. India cried in shock and anger. Gandhi called it a turning point. He asked Indians to unite, to boycott British goods, courts, and schools. He spoke in simple words that reached the poor and the rich. Non-cooperation began. Millions listened. The freedom struggle had found its soul, and it was peaceful, brave, and unstoppable. Across towns and villages, people felt strength in discipline, sacrifice, and hope for a new India. British rule now faced a challenge it did not understand or control. By 1930, British laws touched even salt, a basic need. Indians could not make it freely. Gandhi chose salt to show injustice in simple terms. On March 12, 1930, he began the Dandi March from Sabarmati Ashram. With him walked a small group. As days passed, thousands joined. For 24 days, they walked about 240 miles. Villagers lined the roads. Some cried. Some prayed. The world watched. On April 6, 1930, at the sea in Dundee, Gandhi bent down and lifted a pinch of salt. With that act, he broke the law peacefully. India felt powerful. Civil disobedience spread. People refused taxes. They made salt. They filled jails without fear. Women stepped forward in large numbers, leading marches and protests. The British responded with arrests and beatings. Gandhi was jailed, but the movement did not stop. Though freedom did not come at once, something had changed forever. India had shown discipline, unity, and courage on a global stage. The empire shook, unsure how to fight a people who refused violence. The road ahead was hard, but India was no longer afraid. The march toward freedom continued. From cities to villages, children remembered this work as a lesson that simple acts could change history and wake sleeping nations. It became a symbol taught in homes, schools, and songs across India everywhere. By the early 1930s, Britain knew India could not be silenced easily. Talks were called in London, known as the Round Table Conferences. Indian leaders went, hoping for real change. But the British still held power tightly. Promises were made, then delayed. Many Indians felt tired of waiting. In 1935, the British passed the Government of India Act. It allowed limited self-rule and elections in provinces. Some leaders saw it as progress. Others saw it as a trick. Still, elections were held in 1937. Indian leaders formed local government and showed they could rule fairly. Schools improved. Villages got attention. The idea of self-rule felt real for the first time. But clouds gathered again. In 1939, World War II began. Without asking Indians, Britain declared India part of the war. Indian leaders were angry. They said, "How can we fight for freedom abroad when we have none at home?" Protests followed. Many leaders resigned from government posts. The war brought hardship. Prices rose. Food became scarce. Soldiers were sent far away. Yet the British still refused full freedom. People whispered that the final fight was near. The nation felt restless, like a storm waiting to break. India had learned patience, but patience was running out. The road ahead would be dangerous, but the people were ready to face it together. In 1942, the pressure reached its peak. Gandhi and other leaders believed there was no time left for half answers. On August 8, 1942, in Bombay, Gandhi spoke words that shook the empire: "Quit India." He called on the British to leave India at once. He asked Indians to act with courage and nonviolence, even if leaders were jailed. The British reacted fast. Within hours, Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, and many others were arrested. Newspapers were shut down. Meetings were banned. But the message had already spread. Across India, people rose. Students left schools. Workers stopped trains. Villagers cut communication lines. For the first time, the movement had no clear leaders on the ground. The British answered with force. Protesters were beaten. Thousands were jailed. Many were killed. Yet the spirit did not die. Secret radio stations spoke hope. Young people carried messages at great risk. Women stepped into leadership roles. The Quit India movement was crushed by 1944, but it changed everything. Britain saw it could no longer control India without endless violence. Indian soldiers in the British Army also began to question their loyalty. The war weakened Britain. India's demand was now clear and loud: freedom was not a request anymore. It was a command spoken by millions of brave voices. As the war ended in 1945, Britain stood tired and broken. Its economy was weak. Holding India was becoming impossible. New events added pressure. Indian soldiers of the Indian National Army, led by Subhash Chandra Bose, were put on trial by the British. Bose had fought the British with help from Germany and Japan. Though Bose had died in 1945, his courage inspired many. When INA soldiers were tried, people protested across India. Even Indian soldiers in the British Army showed support. Mutinies broke out in the Navy in 1946. Britain realized the loyalty of Indian forces could no longer be trusted. Talks began again. A cabinet mission came from Britain to plan freedom. But deep problems remained. Hindu and Muslim leaders could not agree on power sharing. Fear spread between communities. Old unity began to crack. Riots broke out in some cities, causing pain and death. Still, the end was near. In 1947, Britain announced it would leave India. But the land would be divided. India would be split into two nations, India and Pakistan. The news brought joy and sorrow together. Freedom was coming, but at a terrible cost. Trains filled with refugees crossed borders. Families were torn apart. The price of freedom was heavy, but the dawn could no longer be stopped. August 1947 arrived with mixed tears and smiles. On August 14th, Pakistan became a new nation. At midnight on August 15th, India finally became free. In Delhi, Jawaharlal Nehru spoke to the nation. He said India had a tryst with destiny. After nearly 200 years of British rule, the chains were broken. The British flag was lowered. The Indian flag rose. People danced in the streets. Drums beat. Prayers were said in temples, mosques, and churches. For many, it felt unreal. The dream of generations had come true. But joy walked beside sorrow. The partition caused one of the largest migrations in history. Millions crossed borders to survive. violence took many lives. Gandhi walked through troubled areas, fasting and praying for peace. He said freedom meant nothing without love and unity. India faced huge challenges. Poverty was deep. The land was divided. Still, hope burned bright. The people had won something priceless, the right to choose their own future. From villages to cities, parents told children, "This land is ours now." The struggle had ended, but the work of building a nation had just begun. In January 1948, tragedy struck again. Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated. The nation fell silent in shock. The man who had led with peace was gone. Yet his message lived on. Leaders promised to build India on truth, justice, and equality. India became a republic in 1950, with its own constitution. It spoke of rights, freedom, and dignity for all. Schools, roads, and institutions were built. The scars of struggle slowly healed. The story of India's freedom is not just about leaders and dates. It is about farmers, workers, women, and children who believed in hope. It is about courage without weapons and strength without hate. India did not defeat Britain with armies alone. She won with unity, sacrifice, and faith. Her freedom story teaches the world that even the strongest empire can fall when people stand together with truth. This is how India fought for freedom. This is how she won. Freedom did not arrive suddenly in one night. It was built slowly by ordinary people. Long before flags were raised, villagers had already chosen courage. Farmers hid leaders from arrest. Mothers sold jewelry to support protest. Children carried secret messages under their clothes. The freedom fight lived inside daily life. In villages, spinning the chakra became a quiet act of rebellion. Making cloth at home meant refusing British factories. Each trade felt like resistance. In towns, shopkeepers shut their doors during protest, even when it meant losing money. Students left schools run by the British and studied under trees instead. Women played a powerful role. Sarojini Naidu led marches with songs instead of weapons. Aruna Asaf Ali raised the national flag during Quit India when leaders were jailed. Countless unnamed women faced prison and pain but never stepped back. Faith also gave strength. People prayed together across religions. Freedom songs were sung in many languages but carried one meaning. India was learning to stand as one people, not many broken groups. The British had power, but they could not control hearts. Every arrest created 10 new fighters. Every beating created deeper belief. The movement was no longer led only by famous names. It lived in homes, fields, and streets. By the mid-1940s, India was already free in spirit. Only the chains on paper remained, and even those were weakening with each passing day. Jawaharlal Nehru dreamed of a modern India. He spoke of science, education, and unity. Though often jailed, his letters from prison inspired millions. He believed freedom must bring dignity and opportunity to every child. His calm voice balanced Gandhi's spiritual fire. Together, they shaped the nation's future. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel worked quietly but firmly. After freedom, India was still divided into hundreds of princely states. Patel used patience and strength to unite them. Without him, India might have broken apart. He believed unity was the first step to survival. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar fought another battle. Born into a poor family, he faced deep discrimination. He demanded justice for the oppressed. He helped write India's constitution, ensuring equality before law. Freedom, he said, meant nothing without social justice. Subhash Chandra Bose followed a different path. He believed Britain would never live peacefully. Though his methods were debated, his bravery inspired soldiers and youth. His call, "Give me blood, and I will give you freedom," echoed across India. India's freedom struggle was not one voice, but many. Different paths, one goal. Together, they showed that a nation could rise even with disagreements. Their shared love for India held them together, stronger than fear or force. British rule often used hunger as a weapon. In 1943, Bengal faced a terrible famine. Millions starved while food was sent elsewhere. The streets filled with silent suffering. Gandhi called it a crime. The famine showed the true cost of foreign rule. During war years, Indian resources were drained. Soldiers fought for Britain across the world, hoping freedom would follow. Many never returned. Families waited in villages, holding letters close, praying for news. Yet hope never died. Secret meetings continued. Poems were written. Stories of freedom heroes spread like fire. Even in darkness, people believed morning would come. British leaders began to see the truth. Ruling India now required force they could not afford. The world was changing. Colonies everywhere were demanding freedom. India was leading the way. When talks resumed after the war, India spoke from strength. The people had endured pain, hunger, and loss. They had earned the right to decide their fate. Britain's grip was slipping, not because of one event, but because of decades of courage. History was turning its final page on empire, and writing a new chapter called independence. Partition was the deepest wound of freedom. Lines were drawn quickly on maps by people far away. Villages woke up in new countries overnight. Fear spread fast. Neighbors who once shared meals now stood divided by religion and panic. Trains carried refugees across borders. Some arrived safely. Some never arrived at all. Camps filled with families who had lost everything except life. Mothers searched for children. Brothers searched for sisters. The pain was unbearable. Gandhi refused to celebrate freedom while violence burned. He walked through riot-torn streets, fasting until peace returned. His silence spoke louder than speeches. Slowly, fires cooled in some places. Despite tragedy, people helped each other. Strangers shared food. Doctors worked without rest. Volunteers cleaned camps and carried the injured. Humanity survived even in chaos. Freedom was not perfect. It came with scars. But India chose to move forward, not backward. The suffering strengthened the promise that such pain would never be repeated. The nation learned that freedom must always be protected by kindness, understanding, and memory. On the morning after independence, India faced the sun as a free nation. There were no palaces of gold waiting. Roads were broken. People were poor. But there was something new in the air: ownership. Schools reopened with new lessons. Children learned about their own heroes. Farmers planted crops for themselves, not for empire. Newspapers spoke without fear. India had a voice at last. The Constitution was adopted in 1950. It promised liberty, equality, and justice. It banned untouchability. It gave rights to women. It showed the world that freedom meant fairness, not revenge. India chose democracy, trusting its people. Elections were held. Leaders were questioned. Mistakes were made, but the people remained powerful. The freedom struggle became a story told across generations. Grandparents spoke of marches and prisons. Children listened with wide eyes. The lesson was clear: freedom is never a gift. It is earned. India's journey from colony to nation was long and painful, but it proved one truth. When people stand together with courage, even the strongest empire must bow. India's freedom story did not end in 1947. True freedom had to be protected every day. After independence, the country faced deep problems. Refugees needed homes. Food was limited. The wounds of partition were still open. Yet the people refused to give up. They had survived worse. Jawaharlal Nehru focused on building the nation. Big projects began. Dams were called the temples of modern India. Factories and universities were built. Science and learning were encouraged. Nehru believed knowledge would keep India strong and independent. Villages slowly rebuilt their lives. Farmers worked their land with pride. For the first time, harvest felt meaningful. No foreign power would take them away. Women entered schools and offices in growing numbers. The idea of equality, once only a dream, started to grow roots. India also chose a peaceful path in world affairs. She did not join powerful military groups. She stood for peace and friendship among nations. This showed the world that India's freedom was built on moral strength, not hatred. The journey was not easy. There were arguments, failures, and fear. But there was also belief. People trusted that freedom meant a chance to improve, even slowly. India was learning how to walk as a free nation, step by step, holding the lessons of struggle close to her heart. The memory of sacrifice became India's greatest teacher. Freedom fighters were honored, but ordinary people were remembered too. Textbooks spoke of marches and jail cells. Songs carried stories of courage. Statues stood in city squares, reminding people of the cost of freedom. Every year, August 15th became a day of reflection. Flags were raised. Children sang the national anthem. Elders remembered friends who never lived to see freedom. The past was not forgotten. It was carried forward as responsibility. Gandhi's ideas continued to guide the nation. Nonviolence became more than history. It became a value. India showed the world that power did not always need weapons. Truth could move mountains. Young people were taught that freedom could be lost if ignored. Democracy needed care. Rights came with duties. Voting, speaking up, and respecting others became acts of patriotism. India's freedom struggle inspired other nations in Asia and Africa. Leaders from across the world studied India's path. They saw that unity and courage could defeat empire. The story of freedom became larger than borders. It became a lesson for humanity. India had suffered, but she had not turned bitter. She chose hope over hate. This choice became her true victory, shining brighter than any battle won with force. Time passed, and generations changed. Children who once listened to freedom stories became parents themselves. India grew louder, larger, and more complex. Cities expanded. Technology arrived. Yet the spirit of the struggle remained alive. Whenever challenges came, people looked back to history. They remembered that freedom was earned when the odds were impossible. This memory gave strength during hard times. Freedom fighters aged, but their voices stayed strong. They warned against forgetting values. They reminded the nation that corruption, division, and fear were new forms of chains. Schools taught students that patriotism was not anger, but service. Helping others, respecting differences, and protecting justice were lessons drawn from the past. India's culture continued to bloom. Films, music, and books retold the freedom struggle in new ways. Each retelling carried emotion, pride, and responsibility. The story of India's freedom was no longer just history. It became identity. It shaped how people thought, spoke, and dreamed. Even today, when the flag rises, it carries the weight of sacrifice. Every color tells a story. Every thread reminds the nation that freedom is alive only when remembered, respected, and defended by its people. Looking back, India's victory was not quick or simple. It took nearly 200 years. Many did not live to see the end. Some died in silence. Some died in crowds. Some died with hope still in their eyes. The British Empire was powerful, but it could not break the human spirit. Guns failed where courage stood firm. Prisons failed where belief grew stronger. Laws failed where unity held tight. India's struggle proved that freedom is not given by rulers. It is claimed by people who refuse to accept injustice. It showed that even peaceful resistance can shake empires. The road was painful. Mistakes were made. Lives were lost. but the purpose never changed. India wanted dignity. She wanted her voice back. That voice now speaks in many languages, from many regions, but with one meaning. This land belongs to its people. The freedom story is not meant to create pride alone. It is meant to create responsibility. Each generation must protect what was won. Each generation must stand against injustice, just as their ancestors did. India's past is a reminder. Her present is a gift. Her future depends on remembering both. India's freedom story ends where responsibility begins. The struggle showed the power of unity, patience, and belief. It showed that ordinary people can shape history. From the first traders to the final farewell, the journey was long and heavy. But it was also full of courage. India did not surrender her soul. She guarded it through pain and sacrifice. Today, when the national flag waves, it carries the dreams of millions who walked, marched, fasted, and stood firm. It carries the voices of farmers, students, women, soldiers, and leaders who refuse to bow. Freedom is not perfect. It never is. But it gives the chance to improve, to choose, and to hope.